Hey everyone, happy Monday. Welcome to TPUSA Live and welcome to November. That's why I got this little caterpillar on my lip.
I love it. I'm biased, but I like it.
I know, it seems like a lot of people in the office are big fans. Hopefully you're a big fan because you're getting this all month long. We got people laughing in the office right now. Welcome to the show. This is going to be a fantastic live stream for you. Coming up next, we got Q1 Events Daily with Jack Posobiec. Once again, he's got over 1 million downloads on his podcast. It's the best way to start the show. And the best way to start his show today, I guess, is debunking and absolutely ruining Ibram X Kennedy's life's work.
Okay, that's just something that's hilarious. But there's also a more serious thing, John. Kyle Rittenhouse trial updates. Big deal, big deal. Okay?
And then also Alec Baldwin, I guess he faced the press and had a very interesting and kind of bizarre statement talking about what happened on his new movie Rust, where a couple of people got shot and unfortunately one person got killed.
Yeah, and Jack really catches my attention. He talks about like the Great Reset and everything, and he did a little teaser about transhumanism. Okay.
It's a very big word. Good word.
Really freaked me out. I mean, I'm a prepper and I got even more freaked out already. So that's going to be something interesting too that he talks about.
Yeah, so Q1 Events Daily with Jack Posobiec right after sitting on the couch with some incredible people, including Morgan Zegers, host of Freedom Papers, right?
I'm excited.
I haven't heard about that before.
New episode tonight, John. New episode, but we'll talk about that in a little bit.
We will talk about that in a little bit. We also got the host of Politics and host of the Spillover show that you've been on, Alex Clark. And then also, we got Project Veritas reporter RC Maxwell. It's going to be a lot of fun.
I love that. I love Project Veritas.
Yeah, they obviously do some incredible journalism.
Absolutely.
And we're going to talk about that today, too, how there's some media bias. Journalists aren't doing their job. It seems like there's a total difference between President Trump and President Biden, the way the media interacts with them, share story, and there's really no transparency. There's no accountability. We're going to break that down. Also, we're going to talk about COVID mandates because you know if you got someone from Project Veritas on, we got to talk about that.
Yeah, well, John, I now identify as somebody who illegally crossed the border and got separated because I want $450,000, and I think we got to talk about that.
Yeah, we are definitely going to talk about that. And one last thing, it's crazy that you could have a family and two parents could basically become millionaires if you're crossing the border illegally. We're going to break that down. Also,
smart. It's good policy, okay?
Oh, yeah, it's fantastic. Just keep spending money. Just keep printing it and spending money. That's usually worked in the history of the world. So I don't know. Just try it again. Let's go, Brandon. Coming up right after that, we got your weekly show, Freedom Papers. What are you going over?
Yeah, so this time we talk about foreign influence and dangers, why it's better for us to be united as one strong union. And I specifically make the case by giving some examples, like what if California, for example, what if we push them out, okay, and we say we don't want you anymore, go be your own crazy country. Well, what if China then invades California and then they are on kind of our soil, and then it's a lot easier to access us. So we're stronger together. We just got to fix our internal problems, but it's a whole thing. You got to watch it.
You're talking about just a separation, not like a push them out into the ocean like island thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, maybe if we could make them an island, that'd be something else. But unfortunately, we can't.
Once again, let me get a few
of my China's coming.
Let me get a few of my family members out first, and then we can start pushing them out and make that an island, so you can start visiting
just
Hawaii
like me with a pickaxe at the border.
Boom, move them out there. But right after that, you got Politics with host Alex Clark. She's going to talk about the Zayn and Gigi drama, stuff that we don't really know about, but Alex is going to give you all the info.
Yeah, that's why I need to watch the Politics, because I just kind of go, okay, I think I know some of these words.
And then a few of the things she's going to go over, who she thinks is a stricter parent, Giselle or Tom Brady, and why she thinks Elf is somehow a Halloween movie.
Yeah, I don't know what she's going to say, but I'm excited.
I don't really know about that one. But speaking of Let's Go Brandon, there's been something that was in the news all weekend. Very spicy.
Very spicy.
There's been sick-outs and walkouts with Southwest Airlines. Now there's some more controversy because a pilot allegedly said, "Let's go Brandon," on a flight out of Houston.
Oh, and I love seeing the initial rumblings, like people tweeting, my pilot just said XYZ, and then I'm like, no, that's not true. It happened, and it's happening all over the place. So I'm finally excited to see the people. This is the people rising up, baby. I love it.
Yeah, I was reading some of like those leftist tweets out there, which are obviously just so asinine.
Totalitarian, John.
Oh man, it's insane.
No thought.
You had a leftist reporter that said, basically saying, "Let's go Brandon" is the new MAGA conservative Z Kyle. That's the way people are talking about this.
Did you see that? There was a headline, and it was like, did you know that when the conservatives say "Let's go Brandon," they don't mean they're cheering on a guy named Brandon?
Really?
And I was like, oh, you don't say.
Shocker.
They're on to us. They're on to us.
I can't believe it. But we have a great show for you today. Once again, happy November. Coming up next, Q1 Events Daily with Jack Posobiec. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard today's edition of Human Events Daily. Today's top stories powered by Turning Point USA. How I debunked, actually he debunked his own, Dr. Ibram X. Kendi's entire life's work. We're going to get into it. The story the entire internet is talking about next. All the latest news and information regarding the kickoff of the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. Third, Alec Baldwin faces the press with a really bizarre statement. And then finally, 60 Minutes features a transhumanist on their latest show. All this and more ahead, Human Events Daily. So this is going to be one of those weird stories where I find myself in the middle of it because, of course, I tweeted something, somebody responded to me, it goes back and forth. Now there's articles, the Daily Mail's covering this, it was trending on Twitter, it's all over the place. So let's explain what happened. I tweeted an article from my friends over at the Post Millennial, and I wrote, Ibram X. Kendi accidentally admits minority applicants have a better chance of getting into college and deletes the tweet. Here's the tweet that he deleted. More than a third of white students is a study out of thehill.com. More than a third of white students lied about their race on college applications. And about half of those applicants lied about being Native American. More than 3/4 of these students who lied about their race were accepted. And then I wrote, he posted this and then deleted it after realizing he just debunked his life's entire work in one tweet. Because of course, Ibram Kendi is the guy who says there's systemic racism against people of color. And yet you see white students saying that they're, of course, claiming to be people of color so they can get into college. Then he says, listen, now the Olympics begin, the mental gymnastics. They lie about what I said. This is Kendi. They lie about what I said to defend the lying of white college applicants. I wasn't defending the lying. I was talking about your work and your theory. Then he goes this. Here is their line of thinking, tortured line of thinking. When white applicants think they have an advantage by lying about being a person of color, then that means they do have an advantage, which then means structural racism doesn't exist. Actually, yes, that is what it means. So as an update, he then blocked me without giving me a chance to respond. He then started melting down on Twitter. Chris Rufo wrote, Ibram Kendi now claiming that Jack Posobiec's tweets making fun of him are violence and that his own tweets battling a ratio are the equivalent of resistance to slavery. Wow. Hilarious meme, by the way, comes up. Grand old memes, Gom, you got to follow this guy. And it's Kendi just going through the notions of explaining how it's slavery for him to debunk his own life's work and then have to go through and defend against us pointing out that he debunked his own life's work. And we got, of course, the hat trick. What does that mean? 3 tweets in a row of his that all got ratioed. And a ratio, of course, means there are more replies than the tweets, retweets to the tweet itself. But since we're talking about his own words, let's repeat Kendi's own words. Let's go to some video. My friends at Myth-Informed MKE pulled this up. Take a look at this video.
Is and I think I'm understanding it correctly, that any policy or potential policy that would have a disparate racial impact is a racist policy. So if that's correct, then would vaccine mandates that disproportionately affect people of color, would that be a racist policy?
So there's 2 different sort of measures currently. One measure finds that white Americans are most likely to be resistant to getting the vaccine. And then there's other data that finds that Black and Latinx Americans are the least likely to be vaccinated. And so as a result, it's hard to say. But what I will say is, to me, the actual problem isn't the vaccine mandates. The actual problem is when you actually study those, particularly Black and Latinx people who aren't vaccinated, you actually talk to them, we're finding that a lack of accessibility to the vaccine for a whole host of reasons is actually leading to them having a lower rate, while with white Americans, it's more or less the result of their political ideology.
So all policies have a disparate racial impact, and they are systemically racist, except for vaccine mandates. Figure that one out. And then finally, of course, Ibram Kendi talking about transgenderism. Listen to his own clip.
About race, even talking about gender. I think it was last week, my daughter came home and said she wanted to be a boy, which was horrifying for my wife to hear, myself to hear. And so, of course, we're like, okay, what affirmative messages about girlhood, can we be teaching her to protect her from whatever she's hearing in our home or even outside of our home that would make her want to be a boy?
All I got to say, Kendi, is you should have slept on a MyPillow. If you had slept on a MyPillow and had the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, you might have done a little bit better in this one. So thank you to everyone for playing. Thank you to Kendi for just being you, man. Thank you for being you. Today, the trial of Kyle Rittenhouse got underway, Kenosha, Wisconsin. So I want to take everyone back to that day, August of 2020, to remind everybody what was going on in that situation, everything that happened, everything that went down, not just that night, but that entire week, which was leading up to the events of that evening, who Kyle Rittenhouse was, obviously the fact that this trial is going to be one of the biggest ones, not just for Second Amendment proponents, but also this idea of whether or not the law of self-defense, right, is applicable in this situation, and whether we have this. It also speaks to, I think, the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, a bigger question of where we are as a society and which forces do we want to support in a society. The 12 members of the jury are being chosen. I believe they're actually going to seat 20, so 12 in the box, and then active jurors, and then 8 applicants, or 8 replacement jurors if they need alternates. So let's go back on this. You have a situation, Kenosha, Wisconsin, where after the arrest and shooting of Jacob Blake, who attacked a police officer with a knife, right? After he was harassing a woman that he had sexually abused and potentially was in a kidnapping situation of children, the people that descended on Kenosha went in for absolute anarchy, mayhem, arson, looting, and burning. They burned down businesses, entire city blocks. I've gone there. I've walked all those blocks. I've walked those miles. Even weeks after this, even months after this, you could still see places boarded up. People writing, spray painting, right, on the boards outside their businesses. There are live animals inside. Please don't do this to us. Immigrant businesses, it didn't matter, because the people that were doing this didn't care about what they were doing. They were indiscriminately out of control. And the police and the National Guard were unfortunately overwhelmed. And actually, the National Guard wasn't called in by the Democrat governor of Wisconsin. So on that night, Kyle Rittenhouse, even during that day, he had been downtown where he worked as a lifeguard, and he was scrubbing off some of the graffiti that had happened. He was then asked to stay behind to help sand watch overnight because people were worried about their businesses being attacked. And his friend had a rifle and said, Kyle, I know you have medical expertise. I know you have some medical, maybe not expertise, but medical training. Can you be a medic for us? And I'm going to hand you this rifle because we're worried that things could get violent tonight. Kyle said, okay. That night, they encountered so much violence, so much anger, arson, and it eventually led to death. Why did it lead to death? Well, it's quite simple. And if you go through the tactical situation, you can figure out what happened. You had several individuals involved in this, 3 of which became victims, 2 of which died, 1 of which is still alive. But there's one person in particular that we need to pay attention to. And his name, we'll see whether or not it comes up at trial, but I think it needs to come up at trial. It's very important that this comes up at trial. Why? Because this is the person, Joshua Ziminski. I want you to remember that name, Joshua Ziminski, because Joshua Ziminski and Joseph Rosenbaum chased Kyle Rittenhouse down the street after they were participating in an unruly mob. Kyle picked up a fire extinguisher and was running to put out a fire. Joseph Rosenbaum, Joshua Ziminski lied in wait to ambush Kyle. They ran up behind him, pursued him. Rosenbaum throws an object at Kyle. Then Ziminski fires at Kyle. At that point, Rosenbaum goes to grab Kyle Rittenhouse's gun. He has been screaming before, earlier that evening, that I will kill you. At that point, when Kyle is fearing for his life because this person is trying to disarm him, is when he fires the first shots in self-defense. Then he runs, the mob chases him, and he continues to defend himself from their deadly attacks. All of this is on video. We also have a 17-second video of drone footage that we have not even seen the rest of this, but I'd love if we could get the rest of it out. Let's take a look at that footage now. Now, for those of you listening on the podcast version of this, I want to be clear. You can see on the video that people are running away from that parking lot before Kyle Rittenhouse makes it in by himself. Why is that? Because they are running from the shot fired by Joshua Ziminski, the first shot of that night, the shot by which Kyle realizes he's now under attack, deadly attack, and he has to take steps to defend himself. Pay attention, ladies and gentlemen, to who talks about this, to which conservatives bring this up, and to those that virtue signal against it. So, of course, we've been covering the Alec Baldwin story, everything that's going on since the homicide of his cinematographer on set. We now know, of course, that it was a live gun. There was live ammunition in there. We don't know where the live ammunition came from. Obviously, that's a huge focus of the investigation right now. Who put that live ammunition there? Was it supposed to be there? Was this negligence, or was somebody messing around? Was this an act? And we've reported, I believe, exclusively here at Human Events Daily, was this a case of sabotage? Was somebody trying to sabotage this? We know there's been a lot of problems on the set. We know there were a lot of issues between the production of the set, of the people that are actually behind the movie and the staff. We know that people left the staff and then walked off. They brought in more staff. Okay, so union labor disputes. Obviously, this becomes an issue for Baldwin because Baldwin was a producer of this. We also have reports that there were other gun issues, firing issues that took place, as many as 2 to 3 prior to the shooting death that took place at the hands of Alec Baldwin. So, of course, all of this is going to be under investigation, and it currently is under investigation. So Baldwin goes out, and I believe he's out in Vermont. He's out with his family, and he goes and gives a bizarre statement to press that seemed to have been following them around. Instead of just sort of blowing them off, he decided to try to engage with them, and he gave the following statement, which I'm going to play in its entirety.
Let's go. Let's go.
I will.
What do you want to know?
All right, Alec, what's the current state of what's going on with the case?
I'm not allowed to make any comments because it's an ongoing investigation. I've been ordered by the Sheriff's Department in Santa Fe. I can't answer any questions about the investigation. I can't. It's an active investigation in terms of a woman dying. She was my friend. She was my friend. The day I arrived in Santa Fe to start shooting, I took her to dinner with Joel, the director. We were a very, very, well-oiled crew shooting a film together, and then this horrible event happened. Now, I've been told multiple times, don't make any comments about the ongoing investigation, and I can't. That's it.
You met
What
with,
are the questions that you have other than that?
You met with I forget her name in a moment, but you met with her family?
Helena.
Yes,
her
I
name
met
is
with her
Helena. If you're spending this much time waiting for us, you should
don't know
her
her
name.
name?
Her name is Helena.
Helena Hutchins. I met with her husband Matthew and her son. Yeah, that's right.
And how did that meeting go?
I wouldn't know how to characterize that. They're mortified.
You guys, you know what? No details.
Do me a favor. I'm gonna answer the question.
while I appreciate that he was probably very upset.
The guy is overwhelmed with grief. This is something that there are incidental accidents on film sets from time to time, but nothing like this. This is a 1 in a trillion episode. It's a 1 in a trillion film. And so he is in shock. He has a 9-year-old son. We are in constant contact with him because we're very worried about his family and his kid. And as I said, we're eagerly awaiting for the Sheriff's Department to tell us what their investigation has yielded. What else do you have?
No, I'm guessing that his lawyers had probably asked him, hey, don't talk to press, don't say anything. But he decided to do this. Now, I got a lot of flack over the weekend for talking about this and bringing this up and said, hey, isn't he the victim of a crime? How is he liable if he's not the one who loaded the gun? Folks, we've talked about this. Under New Mexico law, and they were in the state of New Mexico, it does not matter who loaded the gun for the purposes of involuntary manslaughter. I've said before, I don't think this is murder. I don't think this is in any way murder. This is clearly unintentional. Also, he obviously did not intend to harm anyone in any way. So it's not even third-degree murder. That being said, his reckless action, and it wasn't just negligent, it was reckless because he was handling a dangerous instrument, which he knew to be a dangerous instrument. He knew that was a real gun. You can tell the difference between a plastic gun and a metal gun. You can tell the difference between an airsoft gun and what he was holding, which was a Colt 45. It wasn't a replica. This was the real deal. So when it comes to all of this, Baldwin, you need to stop giving statements like this to the press. You need to get better lawyers. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for continuing to support us, continuing to watch Human Events Daily. Share this podcast out, share it with your normie friends, being that influence agent. We are still top 3, by the way. I just checked top 3 on Chartable for Apple Politics. So continue to support us and support yourselves, by the way. Christmas is coming up. You got the Christmas season coming. Make sure to go mypillow.com, use promo code POSO, get the 6-pack of towels, get the bed sheets, get the topper, and get the pillows, of course. Get that greatest night's sleep. You got Joe Biden, 42% Biden over there, falling asleep at the COP 2021 in Glasgow, the big green new whatever out there. He's fallen asleep because he didn't sleep on a MyPillow last night. It's as simple as that. By the way, Joe Biden, 42% with the entire apparatus propping him up, the entire media industrial complex backing up this guy, and he can only get 42% in one of their rigged polls with President Biden. That's how bad things are. But listen to how bad things could get. We talked on Friday about transhumanist Yuval Harari. He's kind of one of these thought leaders, and he plays it off like he's this analyst, and he's like, oh, I'm just worried. I'm just observing this. I'm just, paying attention to what's happening. We know what side you're on. You're a World Economic Forum guy. You're a Davos guy. We talked about him on Friday. What happens next? He goes on 60 Minutes with Anderson Cooper just yesterday. You see, ladies and gentlemen, you listen to Human Events Daily, you get tomorrow's news today. So listen to this is the guy who on the last episode we talked about, he was getting into hackable animals. Are humans hackable animals? He had his book, Homo Deus, Human Gods. Listen to what he said to Anderson Cooper on 60 Minutes.
You said, we are one of the last generations of Homo sapiens. Within a century or two, Earth will be dominated by entities that are more different from us than we are different from chimpanzees.
Yeah.
What the hell does that mean? That freaked me out.
We'll soon have the power to re-engineer our bodies and brains, whether it is with genetic engineering or by directly connecting brains to computers or by creating completely non-organic entities, artificial intelligence, which is not based at all on the organic body and the organic brain. And these technologies are developing at breakneck speed.
If that is true, then it creates a whole other species.
This is something which is way beyond just another species.
Yuval Noah Harari is talking about the race to develop artificial intelligence, as well as other technologies like gene editing that could one day enable parents to create smarter or more attractive children, and brain-computer interfaces that could result in human-machine hybrids.
What does that do to a society? I mean, it seems like the rich will have access, whereas others wouldn't.
One of the dangers is that we will see in the coming decades a process of greater inequality than in any previous time in history, because for the first time it will be real biological inequality. If the new technologies are available only to the rich.
So you understand how it works, right? This is how they achieve Elysium. He wants to make sure that economics and financial status will not be a barrier for entry, of course, for any of this transhumanist stuff, because they want you in the system. They want to deny your humanity. This is what Zuckerberg is up to with Meta, the metaverse, the Zuckerverse, all of it. This is the way they are pushing this stuff. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching us. Thank you for supporting. Thank you. Go to your podcast app, leave us your 5-star review, share this out with your normie friends, continue to tell them Turning Point Live, breaking stories, getting tomorrow's news ahead today. And our motto to you, of course, be good, be brief, be gone. We give you the bottom line up front. But before we go, it's time for today's moment of history. November 1st, almost 1,200 years ago, 837 AD, was when Pope Gregory IV instituted today as All Saints Day. So today is All Saints Day, also known in Old English as All Hallows Day. That is the Feast of All Hallows. That's why the evening before is referred to as All Hallows Eve or Halloween. This, of course, is the Christian origin story of Halloween, as well as this entire period known as Hallowtide. Tomorrow, of course, is All Souls Day. So, ladies and gentlemen, as always, you have my permission to lay ashore. All right, that's all for me. I'm not in Washington, D.C. right now. As you can see, I'm actually in Orlando, Florida. I'm here speaking at the National Conservatism Conference. It's a fantastic event, but I am going to turn it over now to my friends in Phoenix, Arizona, the Turning Point USA headquarters for The Couch. So take it away, John.
Hey everyone, happy Monday and happy November to you. Welcome to Turning Point USA headquarters in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm your host, Jon Root, and this is TPUSA Live. Here's the rundown. First, we're going to cover some news you may have missed over the weekend in the daily briefing. Next, we have a full breakdown of how COVID mandates are affecting LA, New York, and some airlines. Then we'll discuss the impact Gen Z has on the workplace. Finally, the mass media landscape has dramatically changed over the years. We'll tell you how and what you can do about it, followed by details about how the Biden administration will reportedly pay illegal immigrants almost $500,000 each. And one last thing. All right, let's dive right on in. TPUSA Live from HQ starts now.
Authentic, unfiltered, grassroots content and conversation every weekday. Live from Phoenix, Arizona at the Turning Point USA headquarters, this is TPUSA Live.
Welcome back to TPUSA Live. We're at TPUSA HQ in Phoenix, Arizona with some incredible people here. We're going to start with RC Maxwell, TPUSA ambassador, also part of the Project Veritas team. Welcome.
Ooh. Thanks for having me. It's comfy over here.
Yeah, this is one of the best couches.
It is.
Ouch.
Well, I picked it out. I picked it out. Fun fact.
You did a great job. You and Isabel picked out these couches, right?
We did.
Oh, yeah. And then I love the mustache, too. Appreciate you joining me with that.
Yeah, we've got a solidarity. Ebony and Ivory representing with the mustache, you know.
We also got Alex Clark here, host of The Spillover and Politics. It's kind of like a denim jacket day, too.
Yeah, I was told that this is apparently not denim corduroy, so I guess I'm left out. It's whatever.
Well, you guys look great. Morgan Zegers is here, host of Freedom Papers. Yeah, I got you.
Okay, I shouldn't attack you so early on in the show.
Especially, too, I'm not going to bring up Freedom Papers later if you're going to attack me this early.
No, it's on tonight. It's on tonight right after this.
It's right after this. But we got to talk about some things you may have missed over the weekend. But before we get to that, America Fest. The biggest party America has seen all year long. It's happening December 18th through 21st. We got some concert series almost every single night. We have some big-time country artists. We also have some of the biggest speakers in the movement. Tucker Carlson's going to be here, Candace Owens, and so much more. Get your tickets at tpusa.com/AmericaFest. First up, we've talked a lot about Loudoun County. There's obviously been some cover-ups there. We've seen just crazy ideologies being pushed on these kids in Loudoun County, but now we actually see another report that there was a 6-year-old that came back home to her mom and asked her if she was born evil because she was white, and this is how the mother responded. It was early in the spring of 2020 when my 6-year-old somberly came to me and asked if she was born evil because she was white, because she was a white person, something she learned in a history lesson at school. What's your response?
That's sad. That's one of the saddest things I've heard out of a school district, and I've heard a lot of sad things this year. Mm-hmm. You know, Loudoun County, they're not without issues. It seems like there's no end. I mean, I think there needs to be some clarity. You know, the School Board Association is a national organization. They govern all school boards. Mm-hmm. I think someone needs to step in there and kind of figure out what's going on. I mean, the issues that's taken place there, you know, your child is definitely much better at home than in a place like that. I think there was a study that said most students, they experience violence for the first time in a public school. So when you hear stories like this, it's kind of obvious why. I mean, there could be deep psychological issues from something like that.
Well, we see like another thing after another thing happening here in Loudoun County. So obviously there was the big case and finally saw justice about the boy wearing a skirt, transgender policy they were pushing in there, and then that happened in a women's restroom. And then now you hear this, and that's why homeschooling is just taken off. You know,
that's
why
homeschooling.
I mean, the homestead homeschooling, that's what you're all about.
Yeah, no, I think it's so important, and all of it starts with mindset. So just shifting your mindset and reimagining community, leadership, and education. And first of all, education shouldn't just end when you graduate from high school at 18 years old or when you graduate with your 4-year degree. It should be a lifelong experience, and most people in America don't have that mindset. Second is where you send your child. Don't trust the public schools as the only way to do it. But I think what Project Veritas does is really cool, and we're seeing the students become little mini citizen journalists by filming their teachers and exposing it, and then it gets put on stuff like the Professor Watch List for Turning Point. So it's just this really great cycle and a system that we've created to expose this kind of behavior. It's wonderful.
Yeah, and hopefully we're going to see some sort of resignation from the Loudoun County superintendent there, because that's something that parents are calling for. But another thing you may have missed this weekend, so Press Secretary Jen Psaki tested positive for COVID, so that's why she was missing.
Very shocking, considering she said this was a pandemic of the unvaxxed. But I don't know there, Jen. What do you have to say? Obviously, you know, I wish her a fast and speedy recovery.
Yeah, of course.
But at the same time, I'm like, you know, is this going to change her mind then on the mandates and everything that they're pushing for, and realizing like, okay, well, something is not working here. There's a little chink in the
her boss, President Joe Biden, was like, all you got to do is get your vaccination and then you won't get the disease, you won't get COVID, whatever. And then his own staffer, his most prominent staffer, I would say, got COVID after getting vaccinated. But you saw her tweet probably. She was like, thank God I'm vaccinated. Now I don't have COVID as bad.
Yeah, that's what she had to say. Thanks to the vaccine, I have only experienced mild symptoms, which has enabled me to continue working from home. I plan to return to work in person at the conclusion of the 10-day quarantine.
When did that become this, like, the mindset, you know? Like, when did things shift? It just happened that became the understanding.
When it happens to them, then the rules change.
Of course.
Very DC kind of avant-garde statement from her. But the interesting thing of that statement, she said that she actually hadn't made contact with any other member of the White House since Wednesday, which leads me to believe, has she not been in the White House? You take a look at everything that's happening in our country, and you have the press secretary kind of not in there.
Well, everybody's missing in action, and it would just make sense.
Very
Borders
suspicious.
are nowhere to be seen. Press secretary gone. We're going to talk about COVID mandates in 90 seconds. See you soon.
Wonderful.
Critical race theory is the most racist thing that is being spread in popular life in America.
Critical race theory is bigoted. It is a lie.
Racism is now being taught to our kids.
Dividing kids based on race, trying to say some are oppressors and some are oppressed is absolutely unacceptable.
CRT is racist. It is abusive. It discriminates against one's color.
It's not critical race theory. It's racism.
Conservatives! Politics is now on TPUSA Live. It'll be here every day in case you want to hear me out along with the rest of the Turning Point USA team. Don't miss out on all the conservative.
You have to ask the question, how is the most heavily funded tribe have the poorest population?
Listen to me. My country is very because everything problem here. Don't have petroleum for Bush and Cuba, for car, for life, for nothing.
And it sucks. Socialism sucks. There's no other way you can describe it.
Welcome back to TPUSA Live. We got RC, Morgan, and Alex. We have to talk about COVID vaccine mandates. You probably have COVID fatigue, but there's more and more news coming out every single day. So I know we've covered what's going on in Washington. Obviously, there's a lot of state troopers, firemen, police officers, every single first responder. It seems like they've been affected by these COVID vaccine mandates. And then now you see different places like LA, the sheriff come out and basically just say there's a mass exodus now of police officers, and they're leaving because of these mandates.
Well, that's not shocking at all. I mean, between that, the riots, the disrespect that they're dealing with on a daily basis, I'm surprised we have any police left in this country. Period.
Yeah, and that's what's shocking about this whole thing too, is when you have Sheriff Villanueva come out from the LA County, say the board's vaccination mandate is causing a mass exodus within the department, which is an absolutely absurd result, because he knows too, it's like, we need these people here. They're here to protect and serve, and then now they become some sort of villain, and you're expecting us to basically try to fight back this whole defund the police movement and then have enough officers to be able to serve the community?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
Well, I've been seeing this like weird manipulation of statistics. Do you guys remember in like elementary school when your teachers are teaching you how to not promote information in a biased way, and so you're supposed to use the right information? And I feel like any basic teacher teaching math would say this is not the way that you show a statistic. What they're doing is they're saying we've reached 90% vaccination levels, 95%, 99%. No, they're counting that statistic after the other people are fired for not getting their vaccine. And then they're saying, we're 99% vaccinated here at our office. I think what's interesting is this is all a little facade, and the bubble's gonna burst once these really crucial employees like our firefighters and our police and the people that are gonna prevent us from getting into really dangerous situations, we've already seen it with the supply chain, they're not gonna be able to hide this anymore because people are gonna suffer on a massive scale. And it's also, it goes back to this concept of like security and safety in America. We've taken it for granted for so long, and now that the basic sense of security and safety is about to be stripped away from us, we are about to experience something, I think, unprecedented.
And we've already said to move out of cities. If you have the possibility, get out of cities, because now you have the sheriff saying not only are homicide rates going to go up, response times will increase, You also have solve rates. Those are going to diminish, and they become unbelievably unsafe.
Yeah, and get out of cities maybe unless they're in Florida, because you got DeSantis offering, what is it, $5,000?
About $5,000.
If I mean, I might leave Project Veritas and go sign up for the academy with that kind of bonus.
Just tell them to move it to Florida, honestly.
I mean,
we're all joining the force in Florida.
Exactly.
Governor DeSantis is making cities great again.
He sure is.
I mean, honestly, yeah, I would live, like when I went to Tampa for SAS, I was like, I'd live here maybe.
Oh, I love Tampa.
But I mean, I'm from Los Angeles, so I mean, I know exactly how bad it is. And they're starving for cops as is. The response times are already dismal, and they already tell you they may not pursue your stolen items. They may not pursue someone who assaulted you. So what is that going to look like with 20 to 30% less of a force? I mean, you talk about a war on women. Women are going to be the first who are going to be vulnerable in states like California. So shocking all around, but perhaps unshocking. I'm sure the media is going to just twist the narrative. When crime starts going up, they're going to claim it's because capitalism doesn't work.
Of course.
Of course.
Well, not only are the wait times super bad right now with, police getting to wherever your emergency is, but 911 dispatchers are not even able to answer the phones. We're at a low for 911 dispatchers. So you're supposed to answer, 911 dispatchers are supposed to answer emergency calls within 10 seconds. In places like Denver right now, it's over 2-minute wait times.
Yep.
That is a life or death situation. They're waiting on hold. They're being told, sorry, our operators are all busy. We cannot answer your emergency. I mean, that sounds like The Purge. That sounds like a scary movie. And that's what's happening across the country. We have problems in all aspects of our emergency responder, areas.
And then we've talked about Austin, Texas. I'm pretty sure it's Austin, Texas, where they're telling you, like, if you don't think it's an emergency, call 311 instead of 911. How are people supposed to figure that out? Where it's like,
they're like, let's send a therapist to domestic abuse calls and stuff like that. It's in their head, this stuff makes sense, but then when it's implemented, it leads to disasters. I call it like Twitter policy. Things that sound good in short tweets for the left that go viral, and then conservatives were like, oh, we wish we were cool and hip like the young people, then all the technology they use. Maybe we don't want to have cool policies that look cool on Twitter, because when you implement these things, look at the disaster that happens at the border in Afghanistan, when the country with gas prices. It was $85 for me to fill up my 4Runner a couple days ago, and I almost cried.
Wow.
So I'm sad.
And then we're talking about how it looks like The Purge. It's starting to look like Gotham in New York.
Yes.
I saw a tweet about that, and I thought that was just so spot on, to where it's like you have just about 23,000 workers that remain unvaccinated, according to data released by the New York City Mayor's office. Obviously, Mayor Bill de Blasio is trying to push these mandates here. We've seen a lot of Stand with Kyrie protests, a lot of protests across the Brooklyn Bridge. We've covered that extensively on this show. And then it also says that 18 of the department's 350 units were out of service when it talks about the NY Fire Department. Like, just think, your house is on fire, they might not be there. You have a domestic disturbance, you have some sort of crime, they might not even be there. It's all because of these COVID vaccine mandates.
And you can't even have a gun. You can't even, get your hands on a gun to protect yourself. You're screwed every which way in New York City.
And it's just the little person, sorry to cut you off, but it's just a little person paying for it, because we all know the mayor, we all know that he's going to be able to have someone check on his house immediately. He has round-the-clock security staff. It's the everyday person who suffers, while the oligarchs, as they've been deemed as society, they're living like kings.
Yeah, well, and that's especially with inflation. Like, all of their economic policies financially are going to hurt the middle class and lower class and young people the most, because it's taking a huge chunk out of our income, and our expenses are now rising at an incredibly fast rate just to go to the grocery store. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I'm 24, so when I go to the grocery store, I don't buy a lot of food to feed myself. I live alone, but oh my gosh, the amount that it's increased percentage-wise is fascinating.
Dude, and I have the diet of a 6-year-old, okay? And my diet literally consists of goldfish crackers and chicken nuggets, and it's like $150 for me to buy groceries. I'm buying snack food. I literally bought yesterday cinnamon rolls and crackers and cookies, and it was $150.
Know how you eat this stuff.
I know, I'm like, wait, what?
I'm serious. I'm just like, I'm stressed out about Thanksgiving. I'm like, how the heck are families supposed to feed, or how are people supposed to feed their families for Thanksgiving coming up with this inflation?
The average citizen, the reality is the average citizen isn't prepared to write a $1,000 check to pay for something that's an emergency expense. So this inflation is really hurting, Americans on a granular level. I mean, today it's no chicken nuggies. What's tomorrow?
Hell, RC.
Wait,
Yeah, don't mess with a chicken nugget.
When she was like, she said like crumbs. She said that the $1,000 was crumbs to people. That's like when they accidentally say the quiet part out loud, how they don't see that kind of money as significant, but it would make the world of a difference.
Ironically, Speaker Pelosi and I have very similar diets. She has a $25,000 refrigerator or freezer full of ice cream, I believe. So her and I would get along on the food level.
Yeah, I'm sure she's got a lot of chocolate chip in there.
Yeah, I think she does.
Nowadays, but with these COVID mandates too, we've seen so much news about airlines. And then we actually had some news from our sources from U.S. Freedom Flyers. They were talking about American Airlines and how basically you have employees that are speaking out about a walkout. They said American Airlines was forced to cancel thousands of flights between this last Saturday, October 30th, to Sunday, October 31st, Halloween. 600 flights on Sunday, 250 flights this morning. And now they're trying to pull a Southwest Airlines. They're trying to say there was bad weather and high winds in Dallas and a staffing shortage because of COVID furloughs.
Liars.
Exactly.
Liars. It's the bubble. It's the propaganda bubble that's popping as we speak.
It's hard for the media to control their narrative. I mean, for now, I think they're going to continue to be able to, kind of build this narrative as they see fit. But eventually, everyone's going to know about the freedom flu. I mean, I'm out there on the East Coast, and the East Coast is absolute just pandemonia. There's no staff. There's rumors of mandates coming now to New Jersey. So there's just a sense of panic everywhere. So for now, they just want to control the narrative. But it's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen when the employees start speaking out. You got to remember, the real reason why the media is controlling the narrative on the airline question is because it is actually illegal for members of airlines to organize. So they can't unionize, they can't organize. So these protests have to be kept silent. So when the media builds the narrative, they can't necessarily debunk it. So it's going to be interesting to see how long that goes on. But I don't know, if you have any flights, I don't really know what the solution is.
Yeah, I'm nervous because I need to fly at the end of this week, and I'm just wondering if I'm going to make it or not. Because I'm speaking at Texas A&M on Friday. I'm like, well, I hope I can get there, But
that's the thing. I wonder what kind of impact it's going to have, because I used to want to travel all the time, especially to campuses. And I hate to say it, but it's like now knowing the risk, I don't really want to book a flight every weekend the way I would to go see kids or to go to events and stuff. And I wonder how it's going to change long-term our patterns just as individuals if we know that we can no longer rely on the airlines, because my flight last weekend was canceled, and it's just too difficult. So maybe we're going to start restructuring how we coordinate that kind of stuff now.
I wish that we could see a conservative billionaire step up, create an airline, and then we would just get rid of this problem. How awesome would that be?
Employ all the people that want to work.
Yes, and employ
all
the
want to
people.
work.
If only there was a conservative billionaire.
Everybody look at the camera.
Well, all of them are leftists. Is that what you're thinking, RC? Just like Amazon, Apple, everybody's a leftist that's a billionaire. Yeah. Which is funny because, that narrative also completely blew up in their faces in the last couple of years. The left being the side of all the working class citizens and all the stuff. They're not. They're all the elites. Conservatives are really the party or the side of the working class. So.
Yeah, and their worth just skyrocketed over the pandemic too. They're trying to pretend like someone for a little while, I was thinking like Bezos, well, luckily Amazon has the ability to hire a lot of people, but the farther it went, it's just like you're still suppressing small businesses.
I think Elon should start an airline. Elon is in the business of travel and things with cars, with spaceships. He would be the perfect person that could afford to start an airline.
And then let's have Pozo tweet it too. I feel like Jack could really get something going.
That
would work.
Jack, are you hearing us?
What was I going to say? I think that it's really exciting for us because I am fine with being inconvenienced with this stuff. All the power to them. I'm fine with not going places or whatever it may be for the next few months, but I hope that they keep hammering this down, and I am excited whenever I see this stuff come up. I don't want them to think that it's bad that they're inconveniencing us, and I'm fine with it.
Well, it's tough too when you have leaders like the pilots union president, Eric Ferguson. You were talking about the union. He sent out an email earlier this week and said that people that were unvaccinated need to educate themselves and get counseling. So it's not only do you not want to get it? You're uneducated, you're a conspiracy theorist, and I love how the U.S. Freedom Flyers responded. And they said this statement no doubt had an effect on the mental health and well-being of unvaccinated flight crews who are still unsure as to whether or not they'll be employed by November 25th. So people are fighting back right now, and they're thinking, Like, what are we going to do?
Yeah, I
We're
mean-
called conspiracy theorists. We want to keep pushing back, but like, are they going to be able to get it done by this November 25th deadline?
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for counseling. You know, I think everyone probably could use a little bit of counseling, but let's be
Especially Eric
honest.
Ferguson.
Especially Eric. Let's be honest. This is gaslighting at its finest. You know, they're intending to make it seem like counseling is going to make you change your mind. This is gaslighting, and this is the way the unvaccinated has been treated ever since the vaccine has become available, which is interesting because pretty soon everyone who hasn't got the booster, they're going to be considered unvaccinated. They won't be fully vaccinated anymore. So there's going to be a little bit of cognitive dissonance there.
Didn't Project Veritas is the group, you guys exposed people on the left, staffers, that were saying they believe in re-education and that we need to re-educate conservatives. And so I see this as being a really easy pathway for the left to follow, to say that we need to change the minds of people. Because what they're doing is trying to change someone's religious and honestly, political thought and get them to switch their mind. And I saw this about the military too. Instead of firing everybody right away, and in every industry, instead of saying you're fired right away, they're going to give people the option to go to therapy and talk about it. And what does that mean? Imagine the pressure of that, knowing like, okay, I've got 3 sessions to change my mind. What are they going to do? And I will say there's Commie China refugees that escape those camps and they go through the re-education, and the guards are given quotas, and they're very nervous about not meeting those quotas, because if the guards don't meet the re-education quotas, then they become members of the camps that have to get also re-educated. And so it becomes a terrible thing once you actually look into the history of re-education.
You know what though? If somebody that is willing to risk their life and go into a burning building or go into a active shooter situation or whatever, our police, our military, our fire personnel, if they're all willing to do that, but they say, but you know what? I don't want to stick something in my arm. Who are we to say, well, then you're fired? Because I sure as hell am not running into a burning building. So why are we going to tell these people, well, then I guess you're out of a job? Are you kidding me? Who's going to do these things?
Yeah, nobody's going to do it. And you're talking about LA, so like 20 to 30%, that's what the sheriff's saying, are unvaccinated. And that's what they're down right now. So it's dangerous in LA. It's dangerous in New York. It's dangerous in places like Chicago, in Washington now. And then now you're thinking about jumping on a flight, and you're thinking they might have some sort of skeleton crew to like get you to where you need to go. That should be terrifying for everybody, for stuff like that.
And what's the point? Just so when they do finally get COVID, when they're vaccinated, they can send out a press statement like Jen Psaki and say, thank God I was vaccinated.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. What is the point?
Yeah. Exactly. But we hope that we have U.S. Freedom Flyers and other people just stepping up all across the country, because they have until November 25th, and we hope they can find a way forward. But coming up next, we're going to talk about how Gen Z is affecting the workplace. I'm a millennial. I can't wait to talk about it. See you in 90 seconds.
This has all happened before. The riots, violence, church burning, attacks on police, destruction of private property.
My name is Sammy Steigman. I am a Holocaust survivor.
This is the reality of what happens when you have capitalism that goes to socialism.
El socialismo no funciona.
El socialismo no funciona.
Welcome back to TPUSA Live. We got RC and Morgan. We got to talk about Gen Z in the workplace. Are you Gen Z?
I'm 96 December, and so half the time I'm told I'm millennial, half the time I'm told I'm whatever, Gen Z. I pick whatever sounds better in the conversation.
Well, you just
that
made the
make
cutoff because Gen Z birth years is 1997 to 2012.
No, I want to be Gen Z, John.
All right,
I don't wanna
for
be
this
put in
segment, you can be
millennial
Gen Z.
Okay, thank you.
But I think, especially working at a place like Turning Point, you got people, probably the average age around here is probably like 24 years old,
Yeah.
right around your age too.
I turn 25 soon, sir.
Ooh.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Grandpa.
Yeah, we're just a bunch of grandpas over here.
Yeah, I'm definitely a grandpa.
Wait, how old are you?
I'm actually 33 years old. I know black don't crack, but I'm definitely up there. So I don't have a TikTok or anything.
Okay.
But they're saying that Gen Z will make up about 27% of the workforce by 2025. And the reason we talk about this too is it seems like the work landscape is totally changing. We're going to talk about how the media landscape has changed a lot now too. But the idea of, you know, climbing up the ladder and staying in a place for a really long time, and like they've mentioned we have a New York Times article. It's like, oh, you work at a place for a long time. Get that gold watch. Buy that place. Get the white fence, and then you stay in that place.
That sounds so 1980s. It's not even funny.
And that's something that Gen Z, I think, is pushing back against a lot.
Times have changed. Like I don't work at a corporation or 9 to 5. I actually had one 9 to 5 job. I saw what the lifestyle was for women, and you know, we're about to radicalize the ladies out here. I saw the women that were engaged or married trying to plan out, like, okay, when am I going to get pregnant according to my work schedule? And then the pregnant women were trying to stay at their job until they were about to pop and give birth so that they could have a few more days at home with their infant child before they had to go back to the 9 to 5. And then I saw the women with the kids that were at work all day but had just rushed the kids to school, rushed to get them some crappy breakfast, rushed to work in rush hour, and then they go to work all day and they miss their kids, and then they go home and then they have to pick their kids up, bring them back, make them dinner, send them to bed, and it's this endless cycle, and they are so unhappy with it. And I looked at it all, and I swear, you guys, I said, well, this ain't not for me. It's not for me. And so I tried to find a more flexible way, and I think our modern economy really empowers women because we can earn a living, we can work a passion, we can have an active career, and we don't have to be in the corporate structure.
And I feel like that's something that we're talking about too. And we got to get Alex Clark back on here because
hello.
you can't skip out of a Gen Z workplace conversation.
Sorry.
I thought we lost it.
It's all good because I was the only person in a jean jacket and I felt lonely.
Oh, we're back.
We had to get you back.
John, this can identify as Gene. The lefties do it all the time.
Don't buy into the leftist garbage saying you
it's
identify as
a
a jean
transracial jacket like the Korean guy or the white guy that got the eye surgery to become Korean.
Oh, hey now.
Did you not see that?
I did see that.
That was hilarious.
I think that was on What in the World Wednesday. That is also one of the best days of the week to watch TPUSA live. That is always good. But I think with Gen Z in the workplace, this is probably some of the most entitled generation we've ever seen. I think that's what it kind of comes down to.
Look,
too.
man, I know you want me to be a millennial on your side, but I'm gonna have to agree with her. I'm not hating on Gen Z for this. I think she said a key word: modern economy. You know, our parents' generation. My grandmother, she had 3 jobs. You know, that's it, 3 employers. They said millennials are going to average, 9, 10 employers. I'm about there now, so look out, Project Veritas. But then Gen Z, they're going to probably change jobs 30 times. And I think that's a consequence of the way the economy is structured. You know, Gen Z, they have to be more flexible. I think she's right. People want to do their own things. They want to live their best life according to what Instagram and TikTok.
Or even reinvest in family. That was a concept that was kind of lost, and now people are recognizing I should be spending more time developing my family and building that.
Yeah, true.
Well, I think the pandemic totally just flipped everything too. So like now your idea in talking about Gen Z looking at the workplace, coming out of college. So this said here, Gen Z job candidates from a recruitment software company, Ripple Match, this was a fall 2021 survey, found that more than 2/3 wanted jobs that were indefinitely remote. So like now people are just like, they don't want to go into a workplace. And now it's like corporations, are you going to be investing into these big buildings, these high-rise places anymore? It seems like everybody wants to work from home, and that changes the work structure a little bit.
Well, I will say this. One thing that I think with Gen Z is that they didn't grow up even really, it wasn't encouraged growing up for Gen Z to do a lot of critical thinking. Everything was just, I'm sorry, but everything was just kind of like, this is what you're going to do. You're going to go to college. Basically like, you can figure out your life later. And so everybody's just kind of like drifting through life, and nobody really is motivated to figure out hardcore what they want to do. They just keep pushing it off. And now with the pandemic, a lot of Gen Z did get kind of knocked out of college, like, oh crap, do I want to be paying, you know, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year in some circumstances for tuition to go online? And it's just like their whole lives have been turned upside down. And so I think that's a huge problem with that generation. And, you know, I'm millennial working with mostly Gen Z here at Turning Point, and so I see this difference in thinking a lot of times too.
Yeah, what's the experience been going from radio to here at TPUSA HQ, and just the idea of working with Gen Z and millennials and your workplace balance?
Well, I was always in radio. I was always the youngest person in my company. Any radio company I ever worked for, I was the baby. Then I came here, and now I'm like geriatric, because everybody here is like 19, 20 years old. People are turning 21 at our office. You know what I mean? Like they're coming here right out of college, or they're skipping college and then coming to work here. Yeah. And I'm 28, so I'm quite a bit older. So I feel that difference a lot. But I think that I expect to graduate from college and be making $65,000, $70,000 a year, like as soon as I graduate. And I'm like, honey, I started my career when I was 18. I remember the first job that I had, I was making barely $25,000. And that was, you know, I started interning, literally getting waters for people, like filling up their coffees, like doing all that. Nobody wants to cut their teeth and put that work in anymore. Everybody just expects to have that white collar, six-figure salary immediately. It is very rare for people, you know, before you're 30 to be making that much money. It's very, very few and far between. So, but they think that that's what they're supposed to do. They think that's normal. It's not.
Well, we see it, I'm sorry to say this, but we see it like in the conservative movement. I have people that will message me and they say they want to get into the industry of political influencing, and how can they get started, and how they really see this as their future. And I'm like, you want to what? Like that doesn't make you any money or whatever. And then they're like, and then I want to run for office at 25. So how can I really start building my following? And I'm just like, oh my gosh, what has happened that this has become an actual industry? Like, you need to get your feet on the pavement and start working hard and getting waters for people and really humbling yourself before you start saying that kind of stuff.
There's also been this crossover of young people thinking that you're supposed to love your job. That's a luxury to love your job. 100%. I love my job, but but I also recognize that's very few and far between. My dad never loved his job, but he made good money. Usually you have to choose between that. Do you want to make a lot of money but hate your job, or love it? And that was something really ingrained in millennials first. Now I think Gen Z.
Well, it's because all these companies, they started offering ping pong at the office, and you know, you can play beer pong on your lunch break. And Gen Z, they're just a generation, they think everything is cringe. You know, they comment cringe on everything. So you can offer them the world and a $75,000 salary, and they'd rather play video games on their lunch break, so they're just going to say cringe.
Well, and I think too, like, corporations are really out of touch with that. They think they're being hit by like appeasing this. And I remember they put like a free coffee shop in my first job in Boston, where it's like everybody was making pretty low for the Boston area, and they had said, okay, your raise for like every year, it's capped at $1,000 to $3,000, and it just really upset everyone because they were like, we don't want free coffee and all these fun little ping pong tables and a game room and all this stuff. We want to be able to advance our career and grow. And so I think that they also aren't getting it up at the top because they think they're being young and hip for all the cool young Gen Zers.
Well, I feel like people have to understand getting into the workforce is uncomfortable, and you have to be uncomfortable in these jobs. And then with failing and with having tough situations in the workplace, learning about your skill set, about who you are as a person, it's really good being uncomfortable, because you can't just jump right in, just like you said, enjoying everything about your job, getting all the money you want. You got to figure out finances. You got to figure out how to like get on the struggle bus a little bit, and then find a way to like get off. Like,
well, there's also dignity in hard work, and that's something I think you were kind of touching on it. We've totally forgotten that concept with millennials and Gen Z. It's okay to not love your job and find it as like this luxurious, fun thing to do every day. There's dignity in going to work and providing for your family and earning your dollar and understanding the value of that dollar, and then not doing it because it's fun every day, but because you need to provide for your family and grow your legacy as a family unit. That's
almost
what
no one loves their first job. Their first job, I don't know anyone who loved their first job. Unless you're like a lifeguard and you get to look at hot, topless, or shirtless guys all day. I mean,
Mine was like, I was a diner girl. That was my first job. And I would come home like with maple syrup on my belly button and just like disgusting. So that was fun.
I was a lifeguard for a little while.
I can
think
see
that was a good time. I had my just like size 13 bright pink Crocs. I was up there just scanning the waters. Making sure everybody was safe.
Okay, John.
It was great. Yeah, a lot of topless boys.
Shirtless.
By the way, all the Gen Zers are watching this and they're thinking, okay, boomer.
Yeah. Right? I know.
Do they still
we'll
say
see
that?
you guys in 90 seconds.
That is so true.
If they still say that.
This is your brain. This is your brain on socialism. Any questions?
Conservatives! Politics is now on TPUSA Live. It'll be here every day in case you want to hear me out along with the rest of the Turning Point USA team. Don't miss out on all the conservative.
Welcome back to TPUSA Live. So we have to talk about mass media coverage. And I think over the first just little bit here of President Biden's administration, we've realized that media and journalists, they just aren't doing their jobs. We just talk, which shocker, right? It's just crazy. But doing a little bit more of a deep dive into exactly President Trump's administration and then the way the media responded to it, even before he became president. But once they dove in, you have someone like Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany, and you felt like she was always fielding questions and fielding a lot of threats, fielding a lot of attacks, but always seemed like pretty forthcoming. And it seems like whether you liked it or not, President Trump's administration was pretty forthcoming. And they always fielded questions. Now you see President Biden, anytime we talk about Afghanistan crisis, supply chain crisis, border crisis, let me give this speech on a teleprompter, then I'm gone.
Right.
That's it. And it just seems like right now, media, they are almost just coddling this administration. So what do you think?
I mean, duh. It seems like they're coddling this administration. Have you seen anything that's been going on these days? My favorite is now, I had the same question that a lot of people on Twitter have. And it's when Joe Biden, our president, stands on the podium and is supposed to be speaking to the American people, and he goes, okay, they told me I've got to take this AP. We're supposed to get this question from John Doe over here. Everybody's asking, who is the they that he's talking about that's telling him he has to answer questions from only certain people? We want to know who's behind the scenes. I want to know.
And it's interesting, too, because sometimes you have like, oh, just a bunch of conservatives are talking about it. It just seems like the media was so mean to the Trump administration that now they're just seem to be on the side of the Biden administration. But you have actual research and data behind this. A Pew Research poll. This was the Pew Research Center analyzed media coverage since Bill Clinton's presidency.
Ooh, okay.
So over the past.
Interesting.
So the first 60 days of a presidency, they're going to look at this and going to say, hey, how is the media covering this administration? So their most recent findings suggest the media coverage of the Biden-Harris administration ranks among the most favorable and least critical it's ever seen. And they note that half of all stories about the Biden administration mentions President Donald Trump.
They're obsessed.
Unsurprised.
Lives rent-free in their heads.
Well, it's their only solution. He blames President Trump every single time there is a mess up still. And I keep wondering, like, we've got two pathways we can go here. Are we just so far down this path where the left is so indoctrinated into thinking that President Trump is the main problem that we still face? A right-wing extremism is still the big problem we face. Are they so far down that path that they're going to still keep falling for it every time we blame President Trump, even like 2 years, 3 years down the road? Or are we at a point where like the next straw might break the camel's back, where they might realize, Wait, but this has nothing to do with President Trump, and you're blaming him for it, and maybe something might happen in their heads, but it could go either way, and I don't know anymore.
You know, the left is so obsessed with this whole QAnon thing. I mean, they really love using those few people that got sucked into that to, you know, kind of blame all conservatives, like we're all a part of that or all believed it. Bill Maher's watching Bill Maher's show last week, and he also brought that up to former press secretary Sean Spicer. And he was like, you know, what about QAnon? You guys all believe QAnon. It's like, you guys bring that up, but they are all just as much in a cult with, you know, being so obsessed with President Trump, blaming everything on him. That's a cult too.
Yeah, well, that's why you see CNN's ratings just tank. Like, they don't have the ability to just have President Trump up there every single day.
Well, you need a boogeyman that makes interesting news. And look, you have to realize that the news is just a form of entertainment for people. That's how they're going to keep people watching for longer and get, you know, ad revenue and everything. So they need that. But they don't want to make the boogeyman their own guy. They don't want to make it President Biden. So they have to pick somebody.
Well, that's why I like what you guys do. I find it interesting because it's like they accuse you guys of the editing and the manipulation of the footage and everything, and they basically accuse you of what they do. And we saw that with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the justice, where they removed what she had said about protesting in our country because they thought that it might look pretty bad. They edited an interview. They truly like manipulated the footage to make the narrative different, and then they accuse us when you guys film straight up people with words coming out of their mouths. They say that that's manipulative.
Absolutely right. I mean, we at Project Veritas understand the media ethics problem very, very well. I mean, James O'Keefe has been fighting this battle for a long time, and now, you know, he's built an army of us who fight this battle as well. You know, one of the reasons why you don't see tough reporting on President Biden is because ever since Watergate, we've seen just a deterioration of the way media functions. It's all about sources, and it's all about, you know, those sources dripping you information that's generally agenda-driven and it's motive-driven. And, you know, the public is starting to finally realize, I mean, media distrust is at an all-time high. So, you know, fake news is not just a talking point of one person. You know, fake news is something that the American public is starting to really, really sense, you know, and they really see a problem in it.
And that's why I feel like the left is so effective we've talked about how the left is effective with their marketing, and they're effective because they just play at your emotions. So when you have Project Veritas, you and your team do this investigative journalism, and it's like, hey, we literally have footage right here. It's in front of your face, and then you have someone like you're going to go up and you're going to ask these real questions, raw video. Here it is, unedited, and they're going to push back and just say, hey, this is still just a bunch of conspiracy theorists. You can't trust this media, but trust us that work in line with these social media companies that are going to censor stories.
Yeah, just this morning I was on the phone with the New York Daily News. I had to get them to actually correct an article. They called our report, when we investigated Pfizer, they called it a false report. I had to talk to the journalist, and he looked into it and he said, okay, yes, you're right, I'll make the correction. But if we didn't make that phone call, he would have just called our reporting false. Defamation by insinuation, by implication. So it's very, very unfortunate, but it's not just a big media problem. You got to look at local news. It's a problem. Most local media companies, these small little rinky-dink newspapers, they're actually owned by hedge funds. That's why they all have the same you know, newspaper online layout, because they're all owned by hedge funds. So, you know, we're facing a real crisis in our country with the free press. You know, we don't really have a free press anymore. And the few instances of free press that we do have, you know, we're attacked and we're defamed.
Well, I find it really interesting, you said the sources. When it was President Trump in office, we had all these anonymous sources in the bureaucracy, in the administration, in the executive branch, and they would say, oh, well, they said that they saw something, and that would be used to accuse and vilify President Trump, and then it was national news. And then we find teachers, and we find bureaucrats, and military leaders, and all of these people that are caught saying and doing terrible things, and it's actual faces and names, and then we are told that we're conspiracy theorists and crazy people, and that, oh, those are just staffers and stuff like that, when they expect us for the last 4 years of President Trump to have trusted all these anonymous sources. And it just doesn't add up, because we have so much evidence and factual stuff. But what you were saying, Alex, we don't critically think anymore, and so we can't possibly put the correlation together. It's so strange to me.
Well, sometimes I look at the way our media looks at the administration, and it's almost just like the king and the queen and their family. That's the way to say it, especially when you see Donald Trump Jr. versus Hunter Biden. It just seems like almost just like the prince that can, even though there's a few things out there, it's just like he can do no wrong. Like, luckily he has this like comeback story. Now he's an artist. And then Donald Trump Jr., he's evil. You just look at the way that the media covers these things, and it almost just seems like it's some sort of monarchy that they're bowing down to.
Yeah, I couldn't really say it any better than you did, but I think what's going on, for 4 years, they all sat in the White House press pool and looked at President Trump as he answered dozens of questions, one after another, and spoke from the heart, spoke from his mind, just actual answering every question. Same thing with Kayleigh McEnany. You saw her binder, it was amazing.
Yeah.
That was what they got, and they still accused them of being these like dictators that controlled the narrative and controlled media and were closed off and didn't share any information. And so I always wonder, like, I wonder what's going on in their heads now that they like sit in the White House press pool and they look at Jen Psaki, who just like makes fun of them and sneers at them. And I hate to say that kind of word, but she really does act like such a negative woman or person representing our executive branch. She talks down to the American people when she talks down to those reporters. And I wonder if they ever sit there and go, oh, wait, maybe this is what I should be more worried about, instead of falsely accusing the last administration of doing what this administration actually does. I wonder if it goes on in their heads, but who knows?
Well, it seems like it's almost just like a clock in, clock out situation where it's like, all right, a few people are going to ask stuff, and then probably like Jen and Peter are going to go back and forth, and then we're done. And that seems like it. But I feel like they've lost touch with the American people. That's what it seems like. So when people look at Project Veritas, I can be like, well, this seems like almost like citizen journalists again.
It's real journalism, if you think about it.
Yeah, it seemed like you understand the American people and what the answers they're looking for, and you're covering stuff.
Since we have RC here, though, can I please ask my question about Project Veritas that I've been dying to know for months? I don't understand how these people agree that work in these huge companies like Google or whatever. They agree to go to dinner with you guys, and then they just spill the beans on all their secrets. How do you do it?
Well, you know,
he can't say.
What?
Give us a hint.
I think I saw something on Twitter. Someone said if you work in big tech and if you're on a date that's out of your league,
yes,
you need to stay on Tinder.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Look, you know, we have a litany of ways of getting ourselves in front of people who have things that the public has a right to know, and I think the most interesting dynamic about that is, you know, once they tell the truth, they say that self-evident thing that everyone is interested in, and then we ask them about that later on screen. You know, they scurry away. You know, their congeniality goes away. So, you know, look, we have a litany of ways of doing what we do. Definitely can't get into it and discuss, but you know, one of the real backbones of our organization is our insider program. You know, we like sources as well, just like the mainstream media does, but except, you know, we don't really have that kind of agenda-driven relationship with them. So, you know, we always implore, if you're on the inside of big tech or college campus, if you see anything nefarious, please contact veritastips@protonmail.com. And that's really one of the main ways that we find out things about the truth. I mean, we were able to reveal recently that New Jersey is planning vaccine mandates. And now all New Jersey citizens are concerned. I mean, they're members of the Orthodox Jewish community in Lakewood, Jersey. They're very concerned by these videos, you know. So our mission is to just expose corruption, and we're going to do that in any way possible, and we're not going to stop despite the lawsuits and the threats.
I think what's really commendable, and a lot of us don't understand like the behind the scenes of it, but these people don't get all the fame and glory of like Brian Stelter and whatever, what was his, Jay Acosta and all these like cool press people. But what really shocked me, you guys had people that went behind the scenes in Antifa. And Antifa trainings where they're learning how to gouge people's eyes out. Like this stuff got really intense, and you guys have average everyday people that are never going to get famous, that are never going to get all the followers or the attention or the money, and they're going into these dangerous situations so that we can all see that that's what Antifa is doing with all their training and their secret meetings and stuff. We would never know unless people put their lives on the line, is what I see it as.
You're absolutely right. And journalism is not a neat and tidy exercise. I know we all see the journalist who has all the followers on Twitter, but at Project Veritas, you know, we have the journalists who understand that journalism is not a neat and tidy exercise, and it's all about getting in there and finding out things. So I'm so glad you said that. Yes, our journalists definitely do require and deserve a pat on the back.
Well, and also true journalism was about getting, the star of the show was supposed to be the story, was about the truth. Now they want to be the star of the story, the actual journalists themselves. And so that right there is a huge, I think that's a big, what's the word I'm looking for?
Points?
Well, that's a huge
revelation.
Not revelation, just conflict of interest. That's the conflict
You're
of
right,
interest.
and this brings back up the Watergate point that I mentioned. Remember, the Watergate journalists became celebrities for finding out that Watergate, and they had sources, Deep Throat. Many people argue Deep Throat wasn't really a person. They said, oh, maybe Deep Throat is just an entire organization, or maybe it's just a political party. So yeah, Watergate did something very, very unfortunate in American journalism. It created this desire for the celebrity. Everyone wants to be everyone wants to be a celebrity, and we have celebrity journalists, unfortunately, that masquerade as journalists, but we all know they have other agendas and motives.
Finally, I want to wrap up with this. Alex, I know you have a ton of cute conservatives that go to you and they look for the right information. They go to you as well, Morgan. They go to Project Veritas. They go to you individually. And I was listening to a podcast from Joe Rogan. I know Charlie's talked about it, and then Ben Shapiro. Everyone wants to know, well, where do I get my news? How do I go about that? Because it seems like if I read this article, I can't trust it. What do you tell cute conservatives when they're like, how do I get my news? How do I make sure I find the truth?
I hate this question because it's just not what they're looking for. Like for me to be like www.realnews.com. Like that's not you know what I mean? So I honestly, my thing is I read everything from the left and the right, and then I just think about what my actual principles are, and then the bias just jumps out, especially when you're reading news and not just looking at it. When you're reading it, an actual article as opposed to watching it, like a TV show. All that sensationalism is kind of out, and you can take the bias out of it. But I also really respect and like citizen journalists. So people like Elijah Schaefer, Fleckus Talks, people like that are going on the street and talking to people and exposing the news. Those are the people that I like to get my news from, because it's not going through some kind of leftist purification process.
No, literally the same thing. I get my own news by reading all the sources and then evaluating the bias.
Yeah, that's what you have to do. You have to do your research. Project Veritas isn't going to do it all for you. They're not going to do it all for you. We got one last thing coming up next. See you in 3 minutes.
In these United States of America, this great country of ours, we American Indians, we can be anything we want to be, except American Indians.
A lot of the soldiers were very aggressive, so the women did get raped.
What we call wealthy. Wealthy means a place of suffering, dying, starvation, nothing good. Just like the Nazi concentration camps.
I didn't realize how corrupt things were. I didn't realize what kind of environment we were living in.
We had no running water, we had no power.
They de-incentivize people from, opportunity.
That's why our suicide rate has climbed up astronomical rates.
I moved from the poorest county in America, the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, to the richest area in the country, the Navajo Indian Reservation. There is no difference. The poorest and richest reservations in our nation suffer from identical problems. This is not anything new. This is an everyday occurrence in all tribal governments.
So my life and my tale and my truth has been to fight socialism, and I'm hoping that I can wake up as many Navajos as I can to tell them that you can do this, even if I have to fight you to save you. And I think that's what I'm also projecting to my people. Even though they are so harsh on social media and they completely hammer at me, I tell them, I'll be here even if I have to fight you to save you.
Welcome back to TPUSA Live. We're at TPUSA headquarters in Phoenix, Arizona. We got time for one last thing. We got RC, Morgan, and Alex. So there was reports late last week from the Wall Street Journal that the Department of Justice, the Homeland Security, and the Health and Human Services Department are considering payments of $450,000 to illegal immigrants that cross the border, not the ones we've seen recently, but the ones that were separated due to the Trump administration.
Catch me at the border going, what up, dude? I lost my mom. Like, that is so infuriating. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I mean, you were just mentioning like the $1,000 would make a difference to how many people in America, but then we have to hear this. What really shocks me, so is this going to be like the lottery where like if you win $1 million in the lottery, like half of it gets taken by the government? Are they going to have a big tax taken out of this, or are they just getting a fat check? Anybody?
Well, if I was going to decide between the two, what I think they do, especially right now, they don't have to get tested for COVID crossing the border.
So they're probably just getting all of it, no
it's just
tax
like,
taken out.
boom, here you go. There's the big check. I don't know if it's going to be like Publishers Clearinghouse where they come with this big cardboard check.
They're probably going to like make the American taxpayer citizens hand over the big checks and just be like,
these are all great questions, but I don't think we're going to get answers to this. I mean, we wouldn't know this if the Wall Street Journal didn't report this. I mean, I don't know what their sources are.
Yeah.
We're assuming it's a leak. Right?
That's disgusting.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, something that's obviously just being reported and they're allegedly thinking about.
Well, they shouldn't even be thinking about it. That's the crazy
about
thing.
It is
should not even be thought about.
I mean, in the 90s, when I was growing up as a millennial, I thought that I would grow up and have $450,000 worth of Beanie Babies laying around. I didn't realize that I just had to become an illegal immigrant to get that money. I was trying to find the Princess Diana bear.
I mean, it's just like we still have
investment.
American citizens over in Afghanistan. We've got the crisis at the border.
Yeah.
We've got gas that costs like $7 a gallon in some states. And then you hear this kind of news and it's just like such a tinge to the heart of like, oh, they really hate us, don't they? Like our government hates us.
Like if you've lost loved ones in military service, so for families who've lost lives, the death gratuity is a single tax-free payment of $100,000.
It makes you want to just scream.
Pick your words wisely,
I
Alex.
know. I had to really pick my words wisely. It's disgusting.
It's interesting because, you know, some states are allocating federal dollars at their discretion already to illegal immigrants, right? New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy was going to allocate $40 million of taxpayer dollars to illegal immigrants. So where is all this money coming from? And when is it going to stop? I mean, it seems like it's to no end. I mean, it's just really kind of confusing, and you know, I would love some clarity soon, but it seems like we're not going to get an answer
honey,
from Psaki.
No. You're never going to get an answer on that one. I don't know about you guys, but like around tax season, I hope that our generation, as we become taxpayers, I hope young people are becoming taxpayers and succeeding enough so that they can pay taxes. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
But I hope that they start to look at the amount that they have to give up and then saying, oh, that could go to me paying off XYZ bill. That could go to a down payment on a home. That could go to this investment for me, or it could go to my family and my kids.
Well, also,
I'm missing out on a lot.
Where are all the far left socialists that were, you know, like who cry about repaying their student loan debt and all that stuff?
Ooh.
They should be the ones who are up in arms. Why is the government giving illegal immigrants $450,000 a person crossing the border, but you won't let me, pay off my student loans? So, not saying that I think that's right either. I'm just saying there should be a lot of people, not just conservatives, that are pissed off.
And beyond that, Black Lives Matter, who spent day in, day out rioting for President Joe biden to become president, and reparations, not even a fart in the wind. yet illegal immigrants are discussing $500,000. Whole lot of money.
Well, too, it's just the administration, it seems like right now, too, it's like just throwing money at absolutely everything. And then when someone here, especially, I mean, I think people get so duped into this when they hear something is free. Nothing is free at all.
Right.
Like, that is coming out of your pocket if you're paying taxes.
The infrastructure bill costs $0.
Like, people should be so up in arms about what's going on here, especially when you see taxpayer money go to just basically mutilating beagles, puppies from Dr. Fauci in the lab. And then you have this now where it's like money's going to come out of your pocket, given to people that aren't even citizens here, and then you're dealing with inflation, you're dealing with groceries being more expensive, and you're called a domestic terrorist at school. And
everything is opposite
It's
day.
insane.
Yeah,
it's
time to get off
opposite
grid,
day.
baby. Time to get off grid. Here's my solution idea, you guys. detach from the federal government, be in a state that can be financially detached from the federal government in terms of not having to depend on them to run their own state operations and programs, and then I think you're going to be able to be truly free, at least in this terrible situation. Like, be in a state that can say, screw you to the federal government, because the federal funds really mess with us when we have to like comply with federal mandates as a state, and that could be our way out of this, at least to protect us in the short term while we fix this long-term national crisis that we're in.
Yeah, and I think hopefully people are up in arms enough to where like we stop this kind of stuff. Like this can't happen. I think these are just, there's so many empty threats and there's so many reports about here's how we're going to spend our money, and then the way to fix the supply chain crisis is work 24 hours because there's no traffic. Like, these are all asinine ideas. And it's insane, and people should be upset because it's coming out of your pocket and you're paying for this kind of stuff. But definitely make sure you get tickets to America Fest. We got tpusa.com/America Fest. We're all going to be there. Some of the biggest country artists. We got some of the biggest speakers. But coming up next, we got Freedom Papers with Morgan Zegers.
Time to get
It's been
learned.
a lot of fun. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
All right, you guys, welcome back to another episode of Freedom Papers. This is Morgan Zegers. I'm a contributor for Turning Point USA and a host of this wonderful educational podcast on the Federalist Papers, the Anti-Federalist Papers, basically the documents that made up the ratification debate back in the late 1700s when it started in 1787, when we were deciding should we ratify the U.S. Constitution or not. You know, hint, we ended up ratifying it, and the Federalists won that debate. But that being said, it's really important for us to understand what happened in American history and world history. And so we are going through, thanks to Turning Point USA, all of the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers. Today is one of my more favorite papers. I'll admit, number 2 is one of my top favorites. 51 and 10 are classics, but today we're going over Federalist paper number 4, and it's something that I really enjoy because I'm a history nerd. And I love to understand the historical context of why certain decisions and arguments were made, especially when we're talking about America's founding. Now, Federalist Paper number 4 was written by John Jay. As you guys know, you should know by now. If you haven't, you got to watch the other episodes of Freedom Papers. John Jay, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton came together as the Federalists to write these documents. They wrote it under the pen name Publius. Federalist Paper number 4, though, was written by John Jay. He wrote papers 2 through 5. They were titled Concerning Dangers from Foreign Force and Influence. Well, that was the name of number 2. And then number 3, 4, 5 were named The Same Subject Continued. Very simple. Simple man. But today, like I said, we're talking about number 4. Before we get into it, though, let's give a quick recap on John Jay, because he's quite the man, and a recap on papers number 2 and 3, because we just spoke about those, and I want to give you guys the proper context. John Jay, he's kind of a New Yorker, okay? I'm from upstate New York, so I like to relate to this man. But other than being from New York and being a part of all of the history there, John Jay served as the key negotiator at the Treaty of Paris, which ended up ending the American Revolutionary War and recognized the independence of the United States. All right, pretty big deal. I think I've said that before. Pretty big deal. He later served as the first Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court and the second governor of New York State. So, again, pretty big deal. Pretty great guy. Paper number 2, though, let's talk about that one. Like I said, one of my favorites, and that's because it's just beautiful, okay? I love poetry. I love quotes. I have a bunch of Pinterest boards. Paper number 2 is just so beautifully written, and basically he says we're stronger together, okay? We fought this Revolutionary War together. We won together. Why the heck are we even thinking of splitting up in the first place into little states or little confederacies? It's just not right. And what he says, and it's a quote that sticks with me, is he basically says this land and this people seem to have been made for each other. And he says that the American people and the beautiful, fertile land that is America, that provided so many opportunities for us to grow this great economy in this great country, we were brought together, and he says it was by providence. So I think that that's beautiful. Moving into number 3, though, paper number 3 is more so about logistics, okay? It's about safety. He says that safety is crucial in a free society. He says there's domestic issues, and we'll talk about those too, but how do we protect ourselves from hostilities from abroad? He He says conflict is frequent thanks to humans. I mean, mankind, we have quite the track record throughout history of going to war over what he says are frivolous things. And he's right. I mean, history is a pretty rough tale of mankind. And so he says, you cannot stop people from getting into conflicts. You can't stop war. You can't stop people from having disagreements. You can't stop factions, whether they're domestic or foreign conflicts. He says, though, there's ways to limit it. And he believes that the best way to limit the amount of conflicts is to limit the number of groups that are able to even potentially get into conflict. He says that when you have a bunch of little states, or if we have multiple confederacies dealing with all of these nations around us, there's going to be so many more opportunities for us to get into conflict and war. And it would be safer for us if we're all advocating as one united America. We're not only safer because of that, because we're avoiding the number of potential conflicts, but we're also stronger when we are one united force. And so that's what number 3 is really all about. And today, we're getting into paper number 4. So again, it's the same subject continued, but this one has a little bit more to do with how to handle other causes of war, other than just, conflicts and relationship problems between countries and just causes is what he says. So like breaking treaties or upsetting each other. This is more about the more unique situations, and a lot of it is about economic competition and the tensions that can grow from other things that can lead to conflict and war. Some of the discussion points that we're going to go over today. The first one is just addressing and preventing unjust causes of war and what he's talking about when he says that. The second is trade and economic competition will continue to grow our tension with surrounding countries. He says this. He says, so what are we going to do about it? Okay, so we're growing as a nation. Our ability to produce, our economic strength is growing. We're becoming an economic competitor with these nations that have never had to compete with us before. We're taking their economic growth away from them, and that's going to lead to some potential issues. So what should we do about it? The question next is basically, okay, so what's the best way for us to deal with this now? And Publius, the Federalist, they argue that it's best done as one united nation, where we can limit the number of conflicts and we can be stronger when we're at the negotiating table or when we're just trying to put up a strong front against a nation that's going to try and push us back as we start beating them in trade and in economic competition. But the anti-Federalists, the founders that were on the other side of this debate, okay, so they didn't want to have this union formed. They were either in support of the Articles of Confederation or just not in support of changing to the U.S. Constitution that would create a federal government, a union of all of the states. They said that this was not necessary. They said, we're already able to handle our problems. Okay, we don't need it. They thought it was unnecessary, and they, in general, with all of the anti-federalist papers, they continue to argue that the creation of a federal government is just going to oppress the American people in the end. So they both bring up great points, and again, we ended up ratifying the U.S. Constitution. So it's interesting to hear these debates going back and forth. Now, what's cool, though, and I'm a history nerd, we're then going to talk about a case study. What Publius does is he brings up Great Britain. He says, what if it was separated? Okay, now apply that same situation of what would happen if Great Britain was separated to us and to our states and what we would look like if we were just a bunch of little confederacies or states trying to protect ourselves and we weren't working together, coordinating and having a strong front together. And so I love that case study that he provides. Now moving on though, you guys, let's get on into the discussions and into the topics, but before I do that, just a friendly reminder, I need you guys to buy your own copies of the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers. There's a ton of copies out there. There are books out there that also combine the papers so that you can read them one after another because they went at each other directly of like active weekly debates on these subjects. My favorite one, and I hope you guys get this copy, is the Charles Kessler version of the Federalist Papers. So I hope you guys do that. I hope you read these papers and engage with them yourself. Don't just listen to what I have to say about them. This is just my analysis and my overview. So be sure to read on your own as well. Now, getting into it. Topic number 1. So paper number 3 was about handling just causes of war. But this paper will be about other causes of war. Let's see what Publius says. So Publius says, my last paper assigned several reasons for why the safety of the people would be best secured by union against the danger it may be exposed to by just causes of war given to other nations. And those reasons show that such causes would not only be more rarely given, but would also be more easily accommodated by a national government than either by the state governments or the proposed little confederacies. I will say I like that he says little confederacies because I say that too, but I just thought it was my slang. But if Publius says it, then I think I'm justified. So he goes on to say, but the safety of the people of America against dangers from foreign force depends not only on their forbearing to give just causes of war to other nations, but also on their placing and continuing themselves in such a situation as not to invite hostility or insult. For it need not be observed that there are pretended as well as just causes of war. So basically he's saying we need to also protect ourselves from just causes of war and unjust causes of war, and part of that is making sure that we're posturing ourselves in a position of strength. He moves on to say, humans basically go to war over really stupid causes. He says, it is too true, however disgraceful it may be to human nature, that nations in general will make war whenever they have a prospect of getting anything by it. Nay, that absolute monarchs will often make war when their nations are to get nothing by it, but for purposes and objects merely personal, such as a thirst for military glory, revenge for personal affronts, ambition or private compacts to aggrandize or support their particular families or partisans. These and a variety of other motives which affect only the mind of the sovereign often lead him to engage in wars not sanctioned, not sanctified by justice or the voice and interests of his people. Okay, so basically kings, monarchs, people with way too much power, they're selfish and they abuse the power that they have and they put people into war. They bring harm to their people just to go to war for selfish purposes. So then Publius goes on to say, but independent of these inducements to war, which are most prevalent in absolute monarchies, but which well deserve our attention, there are others which affect nations as often as kings, and some of them will on examination be found to grow out of our relative situation and circumstances, and that's really what this paper is about. So it's a preface to the conversation that we're about to have of, okay, so we're not a monarchy, and we can avoid a lot of these unjust causes of war. We can avoid a lot of this selfishness that comes from monarchies that lead to these crazy wars just for military glory or riches. But we still have to keep an eye out for the following potential concerns regarding foreign affairs and potential conflict. And that's when we get into the relationships that America at the time in 1787 has with other countries surrounding it. Publius says, with France and with Britain, we are rivals in the fisheries and can supply their markets cheaper than they can themselves, notwithstanding any efforts to prevent it by bounties on their own or duties on foreign fish. With them and with most other European nations, we are rivals in navigation and the carrying trade, and we shall deceive ourselves if we suppose that any of them cannot increase without in some degree diminishing theirs. It is more their interest and will be more their policy to restrain than to promote it. And so it's kind of basic stuff of we compete with France and Britain now when it comes to selling fish, with navigation, with the carrying trade. Obviously, when we succeed in this market, when we start growing our economy and our ability to produce, it means we're worsening their performance, okay? We're beating them, and we are taking money from them. We are beating them in the markets. And there will be tension between us and them as we compete for success. Makes sense. It's pretty simple. So, he then goes on to say, in the trade to China and India, we interfere with more than one nation, inasmuch as it enables us to partake in advantages which they had in a manner monopolized, and as we thereby supply ourselves with commodities we used to purchase from them. I mean, there again, it's like we're taking trade partners. Not only that, though, we're adding tension between us, France, Britain, because now we're involving all these other countries, China and India. And it's the fact that these guys used to monopolize the markets, and we're saying, hello, we are a new and growing competitor, and we're about to change up the way you've been doing business for quite some time. You no longer have a monopoly. And even more simply, we also used to just get our goods from these other countries, and now, instead of relying on them, we are providing them to ourselves on our own. We're producing them for ourselves, so we don't have to buy them from them anymore. And we're beating them in production and then selling those products in a way that beats them as competitors. And so we're providing it for ourselves. We're no longer customers. We are now growing competitors, and that adds a little tension. So then Publius goes on to say, the extension of our own commerce in our own vessels cannot give pleasure to any nations who possess territories on or near this continent, because the cheapness and excellence of our productions, added to the circumstance of vicinity and the enterprise and address of our merchants and navigators, will give us a greater share in the advantages which those territories afford than consists with the wishes or policies of their respective sovereigns. So the major lesson here, you guys, is as we grow as competitors in the international economy, we will have increased tension between us and the countries around us and in our vicinity that want to compete with us. Now that comes with problems, right? So the problems that will come from the growing tension between us and surrounding countries over economic success and trade look as followed. Publius says, Spain thinks it convenient to shut the Mississippi against us on one side, and Britain excludes us from the St. Lawrence on the other. He's talking about the rivers. Nor will either of them permit the other waters, which are between them and us, to come between the means of mutual intercourse and traffic. From these and such like considerations, which might, if consistent with prudence, be more amplified and detailed, it is easy to see that jealousies and uneasiness may gradually slide into the minds and cabinets of other nations, and that we are not to expect that they should regard our advancement in union, in power, and in consequence by land and sea, with an eye of indifference and composure. So he's providing examples of how these situations, as America's growing as a competitor, are already leading to some issues between the United States and the countries surrounding it, specifically Spain and Britain, who are impacting America's ability to access the Mississippi and St. Lawrence rivers. So what he's saying is they are not thrilled that we are continuing to grow. They're already affecting us. But here's where I find it a little interesting. We're seeing the back and forth between the anti-federalists and the federalists. So Publius, John Jay, is saying we need the union because right now we have other countries trying to impact us and affect our ability to use the waters that are touching our nation, the Mississippi, the St. Lawrence. He uses it as an example for why we need a federal government to advocate on the behalf of our ability to trade on these. But then I read Patrick Henry in Anti-Federalist Paper number 4. Guess what he said? Pretty much the exact opposite. He says, quote, I will not repeat what the gentlemen, the Federalists, say. I will mention one thing. He's quite sassy. There is a dispute between us and the Spaniards about the right of navigating the Mississippi. 7 states wished to relinquish this river to them. The 6 southern states opposed it, so the states of the north were in favor of relinquishing the Mississippi River to Spain. 7 states not being sufficient to convey it away, it remains now ours. There is no danger of dismemberment of our country unless a constitution be adopted, which will enable the government to plant enemies on our backs, is what he says. The federal government could plant enemies on our backs. By the Confederation, the rights of territory are secured. No treaty can be made without the consent of 9 states. 9 states. While the consent of 9 states is necessary to the cession of territory, you are safe. If it be put in the power of a less number, which it would be under the Constitution, you will most infallibly lose the Mississippi. As long as we can preserve our unalienable rights, we are in safety. This new constitution will involve in its operation the loss of the navigation of that valuable river. Interesting. So he goes on to say, regarding our debt with France, which was another concern of the Federalists, they were saying that, France wants a debt paid by us. We'd be stronger in negotiating with France if we had our federal government. Patrick Henry, in Anti-Federalist Paper number 4, he replies and he says, give me leave to say that Europe is too much engaged about objects of greater importance to attend to us. On that great theater of the world, the little American matters vanish. How fascinating is that? I mean, we were a tiny little thing back then. I get that. We had just won a Revolutionary War, but look at us now. And so this is where I do disagree with Patrick Henry on this, because I think our federal government, the creation of it, allowed us to join the world stage. And I do not think we would have if we remained the separated states or became, some other form of small little confederacies. Now, Patrick Henry goes on to say,
Do you believe that the mighty monarch of France, beholding the greatest scenes that ever engaged the attention of a prince of that country, will divert himself from those important objects and now call for a settlement of accounts with America? And so he's basically saying, like, you guys are worried that these foreign guys over in Europe are going to bother us. They have their own problems, and we're these little small, tiny people compared to them. They aren't going to worry about us. Don't worry about it. And I think that might have been a little naive. I mean, we were up and rising on the world stage, and I think we would have had some problems. But it's interesting to see what they were bickering about back then, debating back then. And again, that was in Anti-Federalist Paper number 4. I encourage you both to read both. I encourage you all to read both. Now, let's move on to the next topic. So, how can we handle the tension and issues caused by competition with other countries in a better way? Anti-Federalists say we don't need to handle it in a better way. We're already able to handle it. Look at this situation with the Mississippi River. And when it comes to the countries in Europe, they don't really care about us. We're too small. John Jay, as Publius, he makes the case that we are able to handle this competition, we're able to handle these growing tensions way better as a strong and united union. He goes to say, quote, "The people of America are aware that inducements to war may arise out of these circumstances, the economic competition, the growing ability for America to compete on the world stage." He says, as well as for others, not so obvious at this present, that whenever such inducements may find fit time and opportunity for operation, pretenses to color and justify them will not be wanting. Basically he's saying, putting it more simply, there is tension, okay? And this could lead to war at some point, and other similar issues to trade and economic competition could spark the same problem of war. And to assume that our competitors could not easily become our potential enemies of wars is very naive. So we have to keep an eye on that, because if they find justification to start attacking us, they probably will. History's proven people will go to war over very frivolous things, even just disagreements with trade. Publius says then, wisely, therefore, do they consider union and a good national government as necessary to put and keep them in such a situation as, instead of inviting war, will tend to repress and discourage it. That situation consists in the best possible state of defense and necessarily depends on the government, the arms, and the resources of a country. Again, put more simply, it would be the most wise decision for us to handle this as a united nation, instead of separate small confederacies that are left to fend for ourselves in this competitive economy that could turn violent if handled poorly, or if we were trying to handle this as a disunited and weak country from that weakened position. Okay, so the next topic, moving on, we're going to talk about why one united, larger government is better for us to be able to handle these conflicts versus a bunch of smaller confederacies or states handling them on their own. We're going to read what Publius says. He says, "As the safety of the whole is the interest of the whole and cannot be provided for without government, either one or more or many, let us inquire whether one good government is not, relative to the object in question, more competent than any other given number whatever. One government can collect and avail itself to the talents and experience of the ablest men, in whatever part of the Union they may be found. It can move on uniform principles of policy. It can harmonize, assimilate, and protect the several parts and members, and extend the benefit of its foresight and precautions to each. In the formation of treaties, it will regard the interest of the whole and the particular interests of the parts as connected with that of the whole. It can apply the resources and power of the whole to the defense of any particular part, and that more easily and expeditiously than state governments or separate confederacies can possibly do, for want of concert and unity of system. It can place the militia under one plan of discipline, and by putting their officers in a more proper line of subordination to the chief magistrate, will in a manner consolidate them into one corps, and thereby render them more efficient than if divided into 13 or into 3 or 4 distinct independent bodies. So basically what he's doing is he's listing off the benefits of what would happen when we're trying to handle foreign conflicts if we came together as a union. He lists off, as a large union, we are we have more potential for great minds from all over the country to lead us. We have more opportunity, a larger population. He says there will be uniformity in policy, particularly with foreign affairs. It will encourage harmony and cooperation for greatest potential success on our end. It'll give us a stronger seat at the table for making treaties. And not only that, but national resources can be applied and dispersed throughout the country when necessary, instead of a bunch of little states left to fend for themselves against these greater world powers. And then on top of that, he says if necessary, we can coordinate the militia for protection of the nation. Moving on. This is where it gets fun. He gives a good case study, you guys, and this is where history nerd Morgan comes out. So next up, Publius starts to say, what would the militia of Britain be if the English militia obeyed the government of England, if the Scotch militia obeyed the government of Scotland, and if the Welsh militia obeyed the government of Wales? Suppose an invasion. Would those three governments, if they agreed at all, be able, with all their respective forces, to operate against the enemy so effectively as the single government of Great Britain would? We have heard much of the fleets of Britain, and the time may come, if we are wise, when the fleets of America may engage attention. But if one national government had not so regulated the navigation of Britain as to make it a nursery for seamen, if one national government had not called forth all the national means and materials for forming fleets, their prowess and their thunder would never have been celebrated. Let England have its navigation and fleet. Let Scotland have its navigation and fleet. Let Wales have its navigation and fleet. Let Ireland have its navigation and fleet. Let those four of the constituent parts of the British Empire be under four independent governments, and it is easy to perceive how soon they would each dwindle into comparative insignificance. Ooh. Apply these facts to our own case. Leave America divided into 13, or if you please, into 3 or 4 independent governments. What armies could they raise and pay? What fleets could they ever hope to have? If one was attacked, would the others fly to its succor and spend their blood and money in its defense? Would there be no danger of their being flattered into neutrality by specious promises, or seduced by a too great fondness for peace to decline hazarding their tranquility and present safety for the sake of neighbors, of whom perhaps they have been jealous, or whose importance they are content to see diminished? Although such conduct would not be wise, it would, nevertheless, be natural, because the states would not be working in coordination. They would be competing against each other. There would be different factions in each of the states under a disunited America. Although such conduct would not be wise, it would nevertheless be natural. The history of the states of Greece and of other countries abounds with such instances, and it is not improbable that what has so often happened would, under similar circumstances, happen again. He's basically saying, look at history, learn from history, look what would happen if we remained a disunited America. We must unite and have a federal government in order for us to be safe from attack and from foreign influence. So then Publius says, but admit that they might be willing to help the invaded state or confederacy. How and when and in what proportion shall aids of men and money be afforded? Who shall command the allied armies, and from which of them shall he receive his orders? Who shall settle the terms of peace, and in case of disputes, what umpire shall decide between them and compel acquiescence? Various difficulties and inconveniences would be inseparable from such a situation. Whereas one government, watching over the general and common interests and combining and directing the powers and resources of the whole, would be free from all of these embarrassments and conduce far more to the safety of the people. Now, what I find interesting here is, again, what the anti-federalists say compared to what Publius, John Jay, and the Federalists are saying in each paper number 4. So the Federalists are saying, this makes a lot of sense because when we work together, when we coordinate resources, when we coordinate men, when we coordinate ambition and goals and policy style, we're going to be a safer place, and we're going to, not only that, we're going to be able to compete on the world stage and protect ourselves with strength in numbers and a strong presence just there at the table to potentially negotiate. But the anti-federalists, Patrick Henry says, consider what you are about to do before you part with the government. This is the end of his paper. Take longer time in reckoning things. Revolutions like this have happened in almost every country in Europe. Similar examples are to be found in ancient Greece and ancient Rome. Instances of the people losing their liberty by their own carelessness and the ambition of a few. We are cautioned against faction and turbulence. I acknowledge that licentiousness is dangerous and that it ought to be provided against. I acknowledge also the new form of government may effectively prevent it. Yet there is another thing it will as effectually do. It will oppress and ruin the people. So that's how the Anti-Federalist Paper number 4 finishes. Here is how the Federalists finish up their argument. John Jay says, "But whatever may be our situation, whether firmly united under one national government or split into a number of confederacies, certainly it is that foreign nations will know and view it exactly as it is, and they will act towards us accordingly. If they see that our national government is efficient and well administered, our trade prudently regulated, our militia properly organized and disciplined, our resources and finances discreetly managed, our credit reestablished, our people free, contented and united, they will be much more disposed to cultivate our friendship than provoke our resentment. If, on the other hand, they find us either destitute of an effectual government, each state doing right or wrong as to its rulers may seem convenient, or split into 3 or 4 independent and probably discordant republics or confederacies, one inclining to Britain, another to France, and a third to Spain, and perhaps played off against each other by the 3, what a poor, pitiful figure will America make in their eyes. How liable will she become, not only to their contempt, but to their outrage? And how soon would dear-bought experience proclaim that when a people or family so divide, it never fails to be against themselves?" Signed off by Publius. Now, what he's saying there, you guys, is whatever we eventually choose to become, whether we want to adopt the U.S. Constitution, ratify it or not, if we want to be confederacies, if we want to be a bunch of little states, or if we want to become a united union that coordinates the states working together, our enemies are going to evaluate us and then treat us accordingly based on what they are seeing. And right now, if we look at this situation with our growing competition on the world stage, we have the potential to be world leaders. We have the potential to compete with these people from Europe, with Spain, with everybody that's in this area. Or we have the potential to what? Divide even further, become these weakened individual states that, or confederacies that don't work together and have more conflict. Our enemies are going to judge us based on that and then treat us accordingly. So I have some thoughts on this paper. I think a big frustration that I have when I read the Federalist Papers, the founders look back on these and they say that these are the greatest political documents. I think even one of them, Thomas Jefferson, described the Federalist, which is the book where all of the Federalist Papers were combined and published. He described this as the best commentary on the principles of government which was ever written. And I agree with that so much. But what's really important for us to understand is that our founders weren't perfect. The Federalists weren't perfect. They may have won the ratification debate, but I see so many different situations where they could potentially be challenged today, and circumstances change. I see so many ways where they are so right, even today in 2021. And then I see some others where it's not that our Federalist founders were wrong. It's that I think our current political leaders have abandoned these concepts. And so when you look back through what we just talked about, you guys, if we were smarter to unite as one country, a united America with our states combining our resources to protect us from potential dangers, then what the heck is going on right now when you look at something like our southern border? Isn't that where we're supposed to be combining our resources as one united nation, where our federal government is supposed to be protecting us from a foreign danger, where our border is being invaded? They're supposed to combine our resources, and we have our best leaders in America, right? That's what our federal government is supposed to be, according to paper number 4. Where are those resources? Why is our government failing us? And I want to talk to you guys about this first. So I suggest that you buy Charles Kessler's version of the Federalist Papers. And it's because what he says is Publius presented the Constitution as an achievement in good government, a plan worthy not only of momentary applause, but of the rational and enduring consent of an enlightened public. And so if we do a little case study for ourselves, and we say, okay, so we have this situation where our federal government is supposed to be coordinating and putting resources down at something like our southern border to protect us from a foreign influence, from a dangerous situation, protecting our citizens. How come that's not happening? I wouldn't say that it is that our Federalists were wrong. I wouldn't say that our Constitution is failing us. I would say that our leaders have abandoned the principles of the Constitution. And when you read what Charles Kessler says, and he says, our founding documents are basically intending for our government to be a representation of the people. So our people are the United States of America. We are the government, and then we choose who we want to elect us. But what if our people lack such basic information and education because of our failing public schools on government, on civics, on history, that then we elect leaders that have no respect for the Constitution? It's because we're no longer an enlightened public, like Charles Kessler says is needed for the Constitution to survive. We're not an enlightened public, and so we can't rationally and enduringly consent to the principles of the Constitution, and then we go and we elect leaders that don't have respect for these core values. And that's on both sides, okay? And so what we need to focus on here is, first of all, making sure that we're electing people and we're putting people into positions of power that understand our founding documents. And again, that's on both sides, just people that have basic respect for the amazing document that is the U.S. Constitution. I believe Charlie Kirk, the founder of Turning Point USA, says it's the best political document ever written. So when we see failures like at the border, it's more of a problem of what's going on with American people. Why are we lacking? I think we're physically weak, mentally weak, spiritually weak, and morally weak. And that's why we have leaders now that fail us and abandon these documents. I would also say, though, I hear a lot of people that say, I'm getting sick of this government. I'm getting sick of America. Let's just secede, okay? We want Texas to leave. Texas will go be its own country. I hear people say California should go out and just be detached from our country as well. Think of it, I know I want to get rid of California a lot too, but when you put it out there like that, think of it like this. Imagine California as its own country. How much easier would it be to invade California as its own country than it would be to invade one of the states in the United States of America, even if it is crappy California? It'd be a lot easier. And by that I mean, imagine communist China invading California, getting on American soil, getting on the soil of the West. Can you imagine that? Same thing with Texas. Imagine Texas. It's filled with great cowboys. I used to live in Texas. I have a house in Texas. But imagine it being on its own and then being invaded by one of our enemies. We are much stronger. As much as we want to kick California out a lot, we're much stronger when we are united. Our Constitution's not failing us. I say this a lot in speeches, but I'm a big Esther 4:14 girl. So people usually use that, and I think they overuse it. But they say that, we were all made for such a time as this. And I think our Constitution was made for such a time as this. It's not failing us, it's being abandoned by our leaders. And so the more we can understand that, I think we're going to be in a stronger position to move forward and understand that we have a lot of enemies these days. And when we are dealing with that, we're much stronger as 50 United States than we would be as an individual Texas, an individual California, whatever it may be. So understand that moving forward. This isn't just an archaic concept that we're talking about. We have to understand the historic principles in order to protect ourselves now and move forward. Because I think our founders were genius. Whether they were anti-federalists or federalists, they had these amazing concepts that built up the West, that built up American society. And they might have bickered it out, but they got forward and they moved forward together. That being said, moving forward for us, how are we all going to act? I said it a little bit ago. Our government is a representation of the people of America, and I believe that strong individuals lead to strong families, lead to strong communities, lead to a strong country. And so the first thing, if you want to do something immediately today, first of all, buy a copy of the Federalist and Anti-Federalist Papers and be listening to this podcast. Remember to post a picture of it and do #FreedomPapers once you get it online and tag me, because we have an Instagram page now. But also, going back to my little equation, the beginning of that, of achieving a strong America, starts with achieving a strong individual. So the best thing you can do is work on bettering yourself, not only with listening to the Federalist Papers, not only listening to Freedom Papers, not only reading our founding documents, but bettering yourself physically, mentally, spiritually, and morally, so that we can start getting people who are like us back into office, leading our country and respecting the founding documents as they make big decisions that impact us domestically and on a world stage. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you to Turning Point USA for giving me the opportunity to do this. I hear a lot of students on college campuses are meeting and watching these episodes, so thank you guys for doing this. I hear charter school teachers, homeschool teachers, moms and dads are watching these with their kids, and I hear the teachers in their classrooms in public school are watching these as well. So thank you so much for doing that. I really appreciate it, you guys, and thank you again to Turning Point and all of our supporters. We love providing this educational resource to everyone. I'll see you next week.